So I just watched the new Joker movie, and it turns out I was surprisingly accurate with my predictions, and I was able to already say a few things about the ending and explain the ending a bit, even before I actually watched it, and it turned out to be relatively accurate. But now that I've actually seen it, I want to say a few more things about the ending and um, explain it in a bit more detail. So, of course, they're gonna be spoilers. So, I'm assuming you've watched it, and now you're wondering about the ending. So, the very last scene is him running through the hallways of presumably Arkham Asylum with blood on his feet um, and running from the guards. So a lot of people took this as meaning that he killed his social worker in this that we saw in the scene just before. Well, I'm gonna call it his social worker because she looks just like his social worker in the previous scenes. But actually, I took this a bit more symbolical. I took it as meaning that, well, yes, he has blood on his hands. Well, in this case, it's on his feet, but symbolically as meaning that he has blood on his hands, that confirming that yes, he committed atrocities. Maybe not all, because that's the question. That's not a question a lot of people are asking. Did he really commit all those atrocities that we see him commit in the movie? Because as I predicted, he is an unreliable narrator. Not everything he sees is actually happening. And since we see things through his eyes, not everything we see is actually happening. So then a lot of people ask, did he even commit any crimes at all? So that's why this last scene is so significant, because it confirms to us, no, he did commit those crimes. Maybe not all of them, but he did commit crimes, at least like the ones we saw. Maybe not exactly like that. Maybe not all of them, but he did commit such crimes. That's why I felt that last scene was very significant. And for me, like I said, it didn't just signify that he probably killed his social worker, but that he committed most of the crimes we see. But I said most of them, and maybe not in exactly the fashion we see. So then the question becomes, well, what is actually in his mind and what is real? And just like in The King of Comedy, we don't actually know. Little spoiler for The King of Comedy. Well, the King of Comedy actually ends really similar, which is why I was kind of able to predict the ending. And a lot of people, after having watched the King of Comedy, come to the conclusion that what's happening is mostly in his head. That the character in the King of Comedy is actually in his jail cell. That he's in his jail cell. That he has been arrested, and the last part of the King of Comedy, where we see him being successful, where we see him where we see his crime spree bringing rewards to him. That's actually just in his mind, and he's actually still in his jail cell, and he's imagining how his criminal activities would bring him fame. That's all in his mind. And I agree with that conclusion, that you can definitely view it that way. But nowhere in the movie does it say that you have to view it that way. You might as well just say, well, no, actually, everything we see in the movie is actually happening. And it's the same with the Joker. You can say that everything we see in the movie is actually happening. Well, except of course those scenes with his imagined girlfriend and the scene in the beginning, um, with with the spotlight being shined on him. At the very least, those scenes are actually explained by the movie as being in his mind. But other than that, we don't know. Other than that, we don't know. Other than that, the movie doesn't explain any other scenes as being in his mind. And because of that, you can view it both ways. You can say, well, since the movie didn't specifically explain that any of the other scenes are in his mind, then they must be real. Or you can say, well, since the movie already explained that those two scenes were in his mind, then surely that's the movie hinting at the fact that some of the other scenes must be in his mind as well. And certainly they designed it that way. They designed it to be multiple choice. You can choose your own ending, so to say. You can choose what you want to believe, which is very much in line with the Joker character, and in line with him having no definite origin story. So what do we know for sure? We know for sure that both at the beginning of the story and at the end of the story, he is in Arkham Asylum, because there is a flashback of him being in Arkham Asylum, and I take that as the beginning of the story in chronological order. It's not the beginning of the movie. He's not in Arkham Asylum at the beginning of the movie, but he's in Arkham Asylum at the beginning of the story, and he is in Arkham Asylum at the end of the story. And I'm pretty sure that's real. That's not imagined, because if you were to imagine that, I'm sure he would have imagined something nicer as him being in the asylum. So then if we know that he's in Arkham Asylum at the beginning and at the end, and if you look at it, it's actually, he's wearing the same white, inmate coat or whatever you call it. Then that raises the question: does the entire movie even take place? And some people have brought up that argument, and it is a valid argument. That is also one way you can see it. You can argue that everything, or like 99% of what's happening in the movie, is actually just him sitting in his jail cell in Arkham Asylum, imagining what it would be like. And that is kind of reinforced by the fact that the social worker is the social worker at the end in Arkham Asylum, and the social worker in the rest of the movie that he keeps seeing on a weekly basis when he's not in Arkham Asylum. Those seem to be almost identical characters. They obviously look similar, both being colored women, and they seem to be almost the same character. But obviously they're not the same person. They're not actually the same character. But why do they make them so similar then? You could say that that's just a coincidence, but this is not the kind of movie that just has coincidences in it. If there is a coincidence like this, then they did that intentionally. So you could use that as an argument for the everything is imagined theory, because you could say that, well, Joker is just imagining being outside of Arkham Asylum and imagining what that would be like, and then of course he would have to populate his world with familiar characters. But in Arkham Asylum he doesn't have a long list of people he knows. He doesn't have contact with a lot of people in Arkham Asylum, so he has to base them on people he knows in Arkham Asylum. That's why you have the similarities, in the social worker. You could even argue that that's why you have the TV host. Why he why the TV host is playing such a big role in his life is because, like I said, he's limited to characters he already knows from Arkham Asylum, to base the characters in the outside world on. So certainly he must have watched that show in Arkham Asylum, and then he just goes on and thinks about what it would be like to actually meet that famous person, and what it would be like to be on that show and so on. And in that aspect, it's the same as the King of Comedy. And in that scenario, I would say then he had to, if all of that is imagined, then where does the blood on his feet come from at the end? So in that scenario, I would say then yes, he actually did kill his social worker at the end. But actually, those are not the only two options. Those are just the two most radical options the movie presents you with. You can say, oh, everything was imagined, or you can say nothing was imagined. But there are also a lot of options in between. You can say that he was arrested at the end after the riot, maybe. Or you can say, well, maybe he was already arrested before that, and the riot part is imagined. Maybe they didn't succeed. Maybe the rioters didn't succeed in freeing him from the police car, and maybe the police just brought him in directly, and that's when he was arrested. And then after that, we see the scene in Arkham Asylum. Or maybe he was already arrested even before that. Maybe he was arrested when the police are chasing him, and the part where he's able to hide among all the other clowns, and where the other clowns kill the policeman, or at least attack the policeman. That's imagined, and that he was arrested when the police were chasing him. Or you can, you can say maybe he was already arrested the first time the police come to see him. So in that sense, the movie really is multiple choice. You can choose what ending you like.